Tabitha Hargrove leaned out the gatehouse window of Verde Springs Estates and pointed one manicured finger at my truck.
Sir, this is a private community. You're trespassing. Turn around in 30 seconds or I am calling the sheriff.
I sat in my F-250 with the window down, looking past her at the limestone entry gate and a row of $3 million mansions stretched along what had been, the last time I stood on it, a hayfield full of bluebonnets. I cut the engine. I got out. "Ma'am," I said.
"Ma'am, my name's Cyrus Marsden. The land you're standing on belonged to my grandfather. 12 of those houses are sitting on dirt that's been in my family 1940.
She didn't know. She didn't know I had a folded copy of that deed in my back pocket. She didn't know her husband's mansion-building empire was about to belong to me. Permanently. What would you do if you came home from years overseas to find 12 mansions built on your land? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. My name's Cyrus Marsden, and I spent 8 years above the Arctic Circle, doing the kind of work that makes a man forget what time zone his own family lives in. I'm a land and mineral surveyor by trade. 49 years old. Born in Fredericksburg, Texas. Raised on a hill country ranch my great-grandfather settled in 1893. 3 generations removed from a German wagon train that fetched up at Pedernales Creek and decided the limestone bluffs reminded them of home. I went into surveying because of my grandfather, Otto Marsden, who was the kind of man who could walk a property line with a pencil stub and a Folgers can and know within a foot where he was. He taught me to read original Spanish grant maps before I could spell my own last name. He died in 1998, leaving me 80 acres along Sweetwater Creek, 10 miles east of Stonewall. Limestone, cedar, oak, a stand of cottonwoods at the bend, and one ridiculous one-room hunting cabin he'd built in 1962 with railroad ties and salvage tin. Then I had a brother, Wyatt Marsden, Marine Corps helicopter pilot. He died in 2009 over Anbar Province, leaving behind a 6-year-old boy named Tate and a wife who 6 months later died of an aneurysm in a Walmart parking lot. The Marines call that kind of orphan a Gold Star child. I call him my son, even if the paperwork still says nephew. I raised Tate from the time he was 7. We lived in Anchorage, Alaska, mostly because I'd taken a contract with a North Slope geological survey firm. 6 months on, 6 months off. Very good pay, very bad latitude. My mother kept Tate during my on-rotations. He's a quiet, observant kid with his father's brown eyes, and a way of looking at adults that suggests he's already counted them. Tate turned 15 this spring. He told me, very carefully, at the kitchen island in our Anchorage apartment, that he'd like to go to high school somewhere with a baseball team and a sunrise that didn't happen at 11:30 in the morning. I called my firm the next day and resigned. We sold the apartment. I packed the truck. We drove south. 8 days later, with a smell of diesel and gas station coffee in my clothes and the Texas hill country lighting up around us in the late April afternoon, we turned off Highway 290 onto Sweetwater Lane, or what had been Sweetwater Lane. The road was now paved smooth and lined on either side with white limestone post and cable fencing. At the spot where my grandfather's old cattle gate had stood for 50 years, there was, instead, a tall wrought iron entry gate with the words Verde Springs Estates in raised bronze letters above it, and a small limestone gatehouse with 2 security cameras and a striped automatic arm. I slowed the truck. I stopped. I sat there a long minute. Tate beside me said, very quietly, "Uncle Cy, is this where it is?" "This is where it is." I rolled down the window. I pulled forward to the gatehouse. The woman inside was in her mid-50s, white, blonde, well-fed, in a pink linen blazer, and the kind of pearl studs you buy not because you like them, but because you want other people to notice you have them. The clipboard in her hand had a Verde Springs Estates HOA crest on it. The little brass nameplate on the window said T. Hargrove, President. She did not look up at first. She finished writing something. When she finally raised her chin, she gave me the smile a woman gives the propane delivery man when she has not personally placed the order. "Sir," she said brightly, "can I help you?" That was the first time Tabitha Hargrove ever decided I was a problem. She was about to learn what kind of problem I am. I kept my voice level. I told her my name was Cyrus Marsden, that my grandfather had owned 80 acres along Sweetwater Creek, that my family had held the parcel by recorded deed since 1947, and that I was, as far as I was aware, currently sitting at the entrance to my own property. Tabitha Hargrove's smile did not move. Her eyes did. "Sir," she said, "Verde Springs Estates is a planned community of 50 homes. We've been incorporated since 2018. I'm not aware of any encumbrances on our titled common area, and I'm certainly not aware of any private parcel along this drive. You may be confused about the location." "Ma'am," I said, "I'm not confused. There's an old cottonwood about 400 yards behind you, at the bend in the creek. There's a limestone block marker with the initials OM carved into the face. My grandfather set that marker in 1971. I was 8 years old. I held the chain." Her smile flickered for the first time. She picked up the gatehouse phone. "I'm calling the sheriff," she said. "You can wait in your vehicle on the public side of the gate." Tate in the passenger seat said quietly, "Uncle Si, should we just go to Grandma's?" I looked at him. He was 15 and tired, and the boy had spent 8 days in a truck cab to come home to a place he'd been promised. I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "We're staying right here, bud. We're not the ones breaking any law." The sheriff's deputy who pulled up 19 minutes later was a guy named Hector Quintana, mid-40s, lean as a fence post, in a tan uniform with the Gillespie County Star above his left pocket. He listened to Tabitha for 2 minutes. He listened to me for 30 seconds. Then he said, to both of us, in the tired voice of a man who has spent 20 years sorting out civil disputes that ought to have been sorted out without him, "Ma'am, sir, this is not a criminal matter. There is no probable cause for either of you. You're going to take this to a Gillespie County judge." Tabitha said, "Deputy, this man is trespassing on private community property." "Ma'am," Quintana said, "with respect, this man has produced what appears to be a notarized 1947 deed from the Gillespie County Register's office, naming his family as the titled owner of a parcel that may or may not overlap your community boundaries. I am not the person who decides which deed wins. A judge is. Until then, neither of you escalates." He turned to me. "Mr. Marsden, I'd strongly suggest you and your boy spend the night somewhere else and come back with an attorney." "Yes, sir." I rolled my window up. I backed the truck out. Tabitha Hargrove stood in the gatehouse window with her arms crossed and watched me go. We drove 40 minutes west to my mother's small house on the outskirts of Fredericksburg. My mother, Lavinia Marsden, 73 years old, made us chicken fried steak and a peach cobbler from the trees in her side yard, and asked us, as she always did, whether we had been eating enough. Tate ate 2 helpings of cobbler. I made coffee. After he went to sleep, my mother and I sat at the kitchen table, with the deed laid flat between us and a single brown moth tapping the porch light through the screen. "Cyrus, when did you last walk that land?" 2017, before they built." "Yes, ma'am." She tapped the deed with one knuckle. "Your grandfather walked that line every spring for 40 years. He used to take Wyatt and you up there with the survey chain. He set those monuments to last. They're still there, Mama. I'd bet my life on it." She looked at me a long moment. "Then bet it." I went to the truck. I got my old field bag, the one I'd had since my Alaska days, with the compass and the GPS and the brass survey pins, and my grandfather's original 1971 field notebook. I sat at the kitchen island until 2 a.m. with that notebook open under the pendant light. The pages smelled like creek mud and pencil graphite, like the inside of an old Carhartt coat. He had drawn the boundary in his careful, slanting hand. Cottonwood at bend, limestone marker OM, south fence existing post-rotted. Boundary follows ridge to highway right-of-way. A piece of land does not forget what its owner taught it. A surveyor does not forget how to find a marker. By morning, I had a plan. 8 a.m. Monday. I was sitting in the law offices of Earl Boyd, an attorney in Fredericksburg my grandfather had hired in 1978 to clean up a fence line dispute with a neighbor. Earl was now 76 and worked 3 days a week out of a converted gas station on Main Street. He had not retired because he did not want to retire. He had a German shepherd named Schnitzel who slept under his desk. I laid the 1947 deed on Earl's desk. He read it without speaking. He pulled a magnifying glass out of his pencil cup and read it again. Then he opened his bottom right drawer, pulled out a yellowing manila folder labeled Marsden, Auto, 1978, and laid it next to the deed. Cyrus, your grandfather walked into this office 47 years ago and made me copy every monument description from this deed onto a separate sheet, notarize it, and file it as a sworn surveyor's affidavit in the county records. That was 1978. I'm betting you didn't know that. No, sir. I bet your developer friends didn't know it either. Earl made a phone call to a friend at the Gillespie County Clerk's office. By noon, we had pulled 3 documents. The first was the original 1947 patent deed, the one I had. Boundary described by natural monuments. Cottonwood at Bend, limestone marker OM. South Ridge to highway right-of-way. The second was the 1978 affidavit my grandfather had filed, sworn and notarized, listing each monument and its precise location with a hand-drawn map. The third was a 2018 Meets and Bounds survey, commissioned by Hargrove Land Development and submitted to the county as part of the Verde Springs Estates plat application. The survey purported to show the boundary of the Marsden parcel 612 feet south of where my grandfather had set his limestone marker. The 2018 survey simply did not show the cottonwood. The 2018 survey simply did not show the limestone block. The 2018 survey began its description from an existing barbed wire fence post, which was, on closer inspection of the satellite imagery Earl pulled up, a post that had been put in by a previous tenant for cattle containment around 1986, with no relationship to any recorded boundary. In Texas property law, when natural monuments described in an original patent deed conflict with a later Meets and Bounds description that ignores those monuments, the natural monuments win. Every time. The original 1947 deed controls. Anything built on land described in the original deed, no matter who built it, belongs to the deed holder unless he has expressly conveyed it. I had not expressly conveyed anything to anyone. I had been in Alaska. There was more. Earl pulled the Verde Springs HOA filing packet from 2018. There was a notarized statement from Tabitha Hargrove, as president of the HOA, attesting that all common areas and lot boundaries described in this declaration are free of any third-party claim and supported by current title commitment. That statement was either negligently false or knowingly false. Earl's eyes lit up the way old lawyers' eyes light up when they see a thing that is going to make a long career feel worth it at the end. If a developer ignores the original boundary monuments on your land and builds anyway, every improvement they make on your dirt becomes legally yours under the fixtures doctrine, regardless of how expensive it is. I left Earl's office at 1:45 p.m. with a follow-up plan, a written engagement letter, and an estimate that we would be ready to file a quiet title action within 10 days. I drove back to my mother's house. Tate was on the porch swing in the shade reading a paperback, with a glass of iced tea sweating onto the floor beside him. Tate, I'd like you to come somewhere with me tomorrow morning. Early. Dark out early. He looked up. Where? I want to find a tree. That night at 4:30 a.m., I made coffee and waffles. Tate came down in his hoodie and his boots. We drove 40 minutes east in the dark with the windows down, because the night air smelled like cedar and damp limestone, and the stars above the hill country were the kind of stars that, even after 8 years above the Arctic Circle, still impressed me. We parked the truck a half-mile down the road from the Verde Springs entry gate, beside a service easement my grandfather had once used to haul hay. The gate was dark. The mansions were dark. There was no sound but the chirp of crickets and, somewhere along the creek, the slow, deep call of a great horned owl. I shouldered my field bag. Tate shouldered the GPS. We walked into the woods. We found the cottonwood at 5:47 a.m., right where my grandfather had put it on the map. It was bigger now. Of course it was. Trees do not stop growing because their landowner is in Alaska. The trunk was 4 feet across at chest height, and the bark was the deep silver gray of a tree that has spent decades watching a creek do its slow, patient work. There was a fork 20 feet up, where 2 main limbs split. My grandfather had carved a small, careful M into the south side of the trunk in 1971, and the scar was still visible, smaller now, ridged with healing bark, but unmistakably the letter he had taught me to carve when I was 8. Tate ran his thumb across it. He did this? He did this. How long ago? 54 years. He stood there a long moment in the gray pre-dawn. Trees keep promises better than people. I did not have an answer for that. I just nodded. The limestone marker was 30 feet east of the cottonwood, exactly where the 1978 affidavit said it would be, half sunk into the loam, mottled with lichen but unmistakable. OM, chiseled deep, the right vertical of the M slightly fatter than the left, the way my grandfather always cut a letter. I knelt down. I cleared the leaves. I took 12 photographs from 12 angles. I set the GPS on top of the marker and let it find satellites for 2 full minutes. I recorded the coordinates in 2 separate notebooks. Tate held the marker board with the date and reference number, the way I had once held one for my grandfather when I was 8. We walked the south boundary together along the ridge for the next 2 hours. 6 more monuments, every single one where the 1978 affidavit said. Every single one well within the line claimed by my grandfather's deed, and well outside the line claimed by the developer's 2018 survey. By the time we got back to the truck, the sun was up, and the developer's 612-foot land grab was a documented fact, sitting in 3 cameras and 2 GPS units, and a kid named Tate's memory. We drove back to my mother's. I uploaded the photos and coordinates to a secure server and emailed copies to Earl Boyd. I made breakfast. Tate ate 4 eggs and went upstairs to sleep until noon. By 2 p.m., it had started. The first call was from the principal of Stonewall Junior High, where I had pre-enrolled Tate for 9th grade 2 weeks earlier from Anchorage. She was kind. She was uncomfortable. She said the school had received an anonymous letter alleging that the guardian of the new transfer student Tate Marsden was an unfit caregiver, currently living in substandard rental conditions, with significant unsupervised access to firearms and unsecured construction equipment, and had had multiple unverified Alaska Department of Family Services contacts. None of that was true. I did not own a single firearm. I had not been contacted by Alaska DFS in 8 years. The letter had been faxed from a Kinko's in Austin the previous afternoon at 4:12 p.m. I thanked the principal. I told her I had documentation that would dispose of every claim in the letter, and that I would bring it personally on Wednesday. I asked her, gently, whether she'd be willing to retain the letter in a sealed envelope as part of Tate's file. She said yes. The second call was from the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. A courteous woman named Yvette, who said an anonymous report had been filed alleging neglect of a minor in my care, and that a welfare check would need to be conducted within 72 hours. I told her, very calmly, to please come to my mother's house any time she wished. I provided the address. She thanked me. I sat at the kitchen island a long minute. Tate came downstairs in his sweatpants and a t-shirt with a hole in the shoulder, scratching his head. He took one look at my face. "Uncle Si, what is it?" I told him. Carefully. Not all of it. Enough that he would know when the caseworker came that this was nothing he had done, and that I was not afraid. He took a long pull on a glass of milk. He set it down. He said, "Uncle Si, Mom and Dad both died. I have spent my whole life with people trying to make me feel like I am alone. I am not alone. Tell that lady to come whenever she wants." 15 years old. 5 sentences. I made the calls. I documented every word. I sent the file to Earl Boyd. He called me back at 6 p.m. He said, "Cyrus, they went after the boy. We are no longer doing a small case. We are doing a big one." Earl, I'm ready. Brian Vance called me at 11 a.m. Wednesday morning from Austin. Brian and I had been roommates at the University of Texas in 1995. He had been a geology major who'd switched to law in his 3rd year. He now ran a title insurance investigation outfit out of Austin that handled forensic boundary disputes for Texas's largest title insurer. I had called him Monday night. He had been digging since Tuesday. Cyrus, sit down. I was on my mother's porch. I sat down on the swing. In 2018, Hargrove Land Development commissioned 2 separate boundary surveys for the Verde Springs project. The first one, by a surveyor out of San Antonio named Hal Plachette, was completed in March of 2018. It identified the cottonwood, the limestone marker, and the boundary at the exact line your grandfather's deed describes. It correctly classified your 80 acres as a private inholding. I was quiet. The second one, by a surveyor named Wesley Trapp out of Houston, was completed in July of 2018. It is the one submitted to the county. It ignored the natural monuments and used a fence post for its starting point. I asked, very quietly, where is Hal Plachette's survey now? That's the interesting part. It was never filed, but Hal Plachette is a careful man. He kept a digital backup in his original field notes. I found him in San Antonio yesterday afternoon. He still has them. He's willing to provide them, under subpoena, with a sworn affidavit. He has, he told me, been waiting 7 years for someone to call him about that job. I closed my eyes. There's more. Hal Plachette also gave me a copy of his cover letter to Hargrove Land Development from April 4, 2018. The cover letter explicitly identifies your parcel by deed reference as a private inholding and warns Hargrove that any construction within those boundaries would constitute trespass and a fixture's forfeiture risk. Hargrove signed for the cover letter. The signature is Roland Hargrove's. The handwritten note at the bottom, in Hargrove's own hand, reads, quote, "Get a different surveyor." I sat on the porch swing a long time. The wind chimes my mother had hung from the eave clinked, slow and gentle, in the spring breeze. A mockingbird ran through 3 borrowed songs in a row from the top of the pecan tree. Roland Hargrove had not made a survey mistake. Roland Hargrove had received a correct survey, read the warning, signed for it, written, "Get a different surveyor" in his own handwriting, hired a more agreeable surveyor, and built 12 mansions on land he knew he did not own. His wife, as HOA president, had then signed a sworn statement to the county attesting that there were no third-party claims. They had then, for 7 years, collected dues from 48 homeowners on common areas built on my dirt. This was not a boundary dispute. This was deliberate, documented, signed real estate fraud across 7 years, 2 surveys, 50 homeowners, and roughly $30 million in construction. I called Earl Boyd. I called Brian Vance back and told him to send everything to Earl. I called Tate's principal and let her know the welfare check had gone fine the previous evening, that Yvette, the caseworker, had stayed an hour, eaten my mother's peach cobbler, and left looking embarrassed. Then I sat on the porch and did not move for a long time. Tate came outside after a while and sat next to me on the swing. He did not say anything. He just leaned against my shoulder. He's 15. He doesn't lean against me much anymore. After a while I said, "Bud, your dad's land is going to come back to us." He nodded. "And then some," I said. He looked up. "And then some?" "All of it." He was quiet a long moment. Then he said, "Uncle Si, don't go easy. Not this time, Bud. The next 10 days I will not pretend were elegant. I had 11 different fronts, and I had Earl Boyd, and I had Brian Vance, and I had a 15-year-old in the spare bedroom who had decided he was the family logistics manager. By Wednesday of the second week, I had stacked the following facts into a single shared file accessible to my legal team and to Special Agent Kenley Burke of the FBI's San Antonio field office, who had been brought in by Brian Vance Tuesday afternoon. Plachette's correct 2018 survey, with monuments matching grandfather's 1947 deed and 1978 affidavit. Roland Hargrove's signature on the cover letter receipt. Hargrove's handwritten note, "Get a different surveyor." Trapp's fraudulent 2018 survey, missing the monuments, starting from a cattle fence post. Tabitha Hargrove's notarized HOA filing statement, attesting to no third-party claims, dated September 4, 2018. Verde Springs HOA financial records, subpoenaed by Earl through state HOA disclosure law, showing total dues collected on common areas located within my parcel. Roughly $480,000 over 7 years. The anonymous letter to Tate's school, traced by Earl's investigator to a Kinko's in Northwest Austin, and cross-referenced against credit card receipts to the Hargrove personal account. The CPS welfare call, traced through prosecutor subpoena to a burner cell that had been activated 3 days earlier at a Walmart on Highway 290, 2 miles from Verde Springs. The 2018 Verde Springs Master Declaration of Covenants, which described the community common areas, clubhouse, pool, gatehouse, main entry road, the limestone fountain, by reference to legal descriptions that I now legally owned outright by recorded deed. 12 specific mansions, each on lots that my parcel underlay in whole or in part. Total assessed value, per the Gillespie County Appraisal District, $32,104,000. Earl and I had 3 strategic decisions to make. The first was timing. The Verde Springs HOA annual meeting was scheduled for the second Saturday in May, 10 days out, at the community clubhouse. Which clubhouse, the records now confirmed, was built on my dirt. I wanted resolution there, in public, with all 50 homeowners watching. The second was the homeowners themselves. Most of the 48 families who had bought into Verde Springs had bought in good faith. They had paid market price to the developer. They had not known about the survey fraud. They were victims, not co-conspirators. Earl and I agreed. The goal was not to kick anyone out of their home. The goal was to wrest the master declaration away from the Hargroves and restructure the HOA fairly. We would offer the 12 mansion owners specifically the option to buy their underlying land from me at fair market land value, with 7-year amortization at no interest. The other 38 homeowners would have their HOA fees restructured downward immediately, since the Hargroves had been overcharging them for years. The third was the announcement itself. Earl wanted to send out registered letters to all 50 households Friday before the meeting. I overruled him. I did not want 48 families panicking over a weekend. I wanted them to hear it from me, in person, in the room, with the math drawn out clearly on a screen. I drafted a 1-page summary of the situation that an 80-year-old could read in 2 minutes. I had Tate proofread it. He moved exactly 3 commas and changed 1 word. He has, it turns out, a writer's eye. I rented a projector. I rented a screen. I rented a wireless mic. I drove down to Austin one afternoon and bought 2 boxes of folders, 1 for each household, each containing a copy of the deed, a copy of the 1978 affidavit, a copy of Plachette's letter, a copy of Trapp's fraudulent survey side by side, and a 1-page Q&A. The afternoon before the meeting, my mother called me into her kitchen. She set a cardboard box on the table. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was my grandfather's old leather field bag, the one he had carried for 50 years. She said, "I want you to have this tomorrow, Cyrus. He'd want you to." I took the bag. I held it a long time. It still smelled like cedar and pencil graphite. I cleared my throat. I said, "Yes, ma'am." Roland Hargrove called me at 9:14 a.m. Wednesday morning, 2 days before the meeting. I was in Earl's office. Earl had set up the call on speakerphone, in record mode, with Texas one-party consent fully disclosed in advance to the court via prior filing. Brian Vance was patched in from Austin. We had been expecting the call for 3 days. Roland's voice was smooth, deep, the kind of voice a man develops after 20 years of selling property to people who shouldn't have trusted him. Cyrus, my friend. I've been hoping we could just talk man to man before this thing goes any further. Roland, we have never met. He laughed. The laugh of a man who has practiced his laugh. Cyrus, look, I think there's been a series of misunderstandings here. I think we can resolve this without lawyers, without filings, without any of this getting messier than it already is. I'm prepared, today, to offer you $200,000. in cash, to settle any claims you may believe you have related to the Verde Springs Estates community. The check is sitting in my office. I can have it couriered to wherever you'd like by lunch. I let the silence sit a beat. Earl, across the desk, was making a please keep going gesture with one hand. Roland, before I respond, I want to ask you a question. Do you remember a surveyor named Hal Plachette? There was a pause. A small one. Long enough. I don't recall offhand, Cyrus. Hal did a survey for you in March of 2018. He delivered a cover letter to your office on April 4, 2018, identifying my parcel as a private inholding. You signed for it. You wrote in your own handwriting, in pen, at the bottom of his cover letter, the words, "Get a different surveyor." Hal still has the original. Hal is willing to testify. The silence this time was a different kind. Cyrus, I think you're operating on some bad information. Roland, your offer of $200,000 is, on its face, an offer to obstruct a federal investigation. This call is being recorded with Texas one-party consent. The recording, along with the documentation, will be in the hands of Special Agent Kenley Burke of the FBI's San Antonio field office by 10:30 a.m. this morning. Goodbye, Roland. I hung up. Earl took a slow sip of his coffee. He said very quietly, Cyrus, that was the cleanest $200,000 bribe attempt I have witnessed in 51 years of practice. Brian Vance laughed out loud on the speaker. Roland was not done. Wednesday afternoon, the Gillespie County Sheriff's Office received an anonymous tip alleging that I had been observed loitering near the Verde Springs entry gate on multiple occasions, and that neighborhood residents are concerned. Deputy Hector Quintana, the same deputy from the first day, called me personally at 4 p.m. to let me know. Mr. Marsden, I am not going to act on this. I have a strong suspicion of who called it in. I'm telling you about it because I want you to have a record. Thank you, Deputy. For what it's worth, Mr. Marsden, my granddad bought a fishing rig from your granddad in 1972. Otto Marsden was a fair man. I have a feeling Saturday's going to be interesting. You and me both, sir. Thursday morning, Tabitha Hargrove showed up uninvited at my mother's front porch. She had brought a casserole dish covered in foil. She had her smile on, the brightest version of it, the homecoming queen with a clipboard smile that she had been practicing on Hill Country wives for years. Mrs. Marsden, she said sweetly to my mother through the screen door, I just wanted to bring you a little welcome gift for your son. I'm sure there's been a great deal of confusion, and I do believe we can all be neighbors here. My mother looked at her through the screen for a long count of 3. Then my mother said, in her steadiest grandmother voice, Mrs. Hargrove, I knew your husband's daddy and his granddaddy. They would be ashamed of him today. Please remove that casserole from my porch and kindly do not return. She closed the inside door. I have, in the course of 49 years, seen my mother angry exactly twice. Once when I was 13 and broke her late mother's china teacup. Once that morning. The second one was worse, and it was not even directed at me. And I will remember the calm, fierce sound of her voice through that screen door for the rest of my life. Saturday morning at 9:15, Tate and I loaded the truck. The folders, the projector, the screen, my grandfather's leather field bag. Tate wore a clean button-down shirt and the cleanest jeans he owned. I wore the same. We drove east. The Verde Springs Clubhouse was a 40,000-square-foot hill country lodge with 60-foot vaulted ceilings, antler chandeliers, and a wall of glass overlooking a limestone-edged infinity pool. Every member of the HOA believed in good faith that the building sat on common area titled to them. Every member except the Hargroves, both of whom knew it sat on the Marsden parcel. I parked the truck. I shouldered my grandfather's leather field bag. Tate carried the projector under one arm and the screen tripod under the other. We walked in. The room was packed. Folding chairs in every aisle. Standing room along the walls. A coffee urn next to a tray of breakfast pastries from the Fredericksburg Bakery. People in church clothes, in Wrangler jeans, in the Saturday formal that Hill Country Country Club women favor. Pearl earrings, blazers, soft cardigans the color of wet sand. Tabitha Hargrove sat at the head table in a coral blazer, hair freshly highlighted, a stack of typed agenda printouts in front of her. Roland Hargrove sat in the front row in a navy sport coat, no tie, ankle crossed over knee, looking like a man who already had his airplane ticket booked. In the third row, between two visibly nervous board members, sat Special Agent Kenley Burke of the FBI. Plain clothes, khaki pants and a button-down, watching everything, saying nothing. In the second row, on the aisle, sat Earl Boyd and Brian Vance. Deputy Hector Quintana was leaning against the back wall in uniform, arms crossed, ostensibly there to keep the peace at a high-attendance public meeting. He nodded at me as I walked in. I nodded back. Tate set up the projector against the side wall, while I walked to the small side table where the speaker sign-in sheet was. I signed my name. Marsden, C. Address, 80-acre parcel, Gillespie County Patent Deed, Volume 4, page 117. Recorded August 2, 1947. The woman at the sign-in table read that line, paused, looked up at me, and her face changed. Tabitha tapped the gavel at 10:03. Good morning, neighbors. Before we begin our scheduled agenda, I wanted to address a small matter of community concern. As some of you may have heard, an individual claiming to be a long-lost owner of certain land in our community has made some unusual allegations in recent days. The board has consulted with council, and we want to assure each of you that the title to your homes and to our common areas is fully secure. Our HOA reserves are healthy, our community is strong, and we will not be distracted from the business of this association by frivolous claims. She paused for applause. The applause that came was thin, not from disagreement exactly, from the kind of social hesitation a room develops when half the people in it have already heard a rumor and are uncertain whether they want to clap for the official version. I stood up. Madam President, may I please address the room? Tabitha did not want me to. Tabitha also knew, because 240 people were now turned around in their seats looking at me, that she could not say no. By all means, Mr. Marsden. I walked to the front. Tate had the projector ready. The screen unfurled with a smooth professional click. The first slide was already up. My grandfather, Otto Marsden's official 1947 Texas General Land Office patent deed, blown up to fit the screen. The chancery-style cursive of the original easy to read from the back row. Neighbors, good morning. Most of you have not met me. My name is Cyrus Marsden. I'm a fourth-generation hill country resident, a licensed land surveyor in the state of Texas, and the deeded owner of 80 acres of this community. The room did not breathe. I clicked to slide 2. This is the deed. It was recorded in Gillespie County on August 2, 1947, by my great-grandfather Friedrich Marsden, on behalf of his son, my grandfather Otto Marsden, who lived on this land for 68 years. Otto died in 1998 and left the parcel to me. I have held title by deed ever since. I clicked. Slide 3. The 1978 sworn surveyor's affidavit with the monument map. Slide 4. The Plachette 2018 survey. Slide 5. The cover letter, Hargrove's signature. Hargrove's handwritten note, get a different surveyor. The room saw it. The room read it. A woman in the third row said, audibly, "Sweet Jesus." I clicked. Slide 6. The Trap 2018 survey, the fraudulent one, with the fence post starting point circled in red. This is the survey Mr. Hargrove submitted to the county after rejecting Mr. Plachette's work. It ignores my grandfather's boundary monuments entirely. In Texas property law, when a meets and bounds description ignores existing natural monuments described in the original patent deed, the natural monuments control. Always. Every time. I clicked. Slide 7. A side-by-side overlay of the two surveys, showing the 612-foot land grab in bright red. What that means, neighbors, in plain English is this. The line your community was built on is wrong by 612 feet. 12 of the homes in this community sit, in whole or in part, on land I have continuously owned by recorded deed since 1998, and my family has owned by recorded deed since 1947. The clubhouse we are sitting in right now sits on that same land. The infinity pool, the gatehouse, the entry road, and the limestone fountain are also on that land. A man in the back row stood up. He looked at his wife. He looked at me. He sat back down. I clicked. Slide 8. Tabitha Hargrove's notarized 2018 statement to the county, attesting to no third-party claims on the common area, blown up. Her signature, unmistakable. This is the sworn statement Mrs. Hargrove filed in 2018. It was either negligently false or knowingly false. The record will eventually decide which. The 7 years of HOA dues collected on these common areas, totaling approximately $480,000, are subject to disgorgement. Tabitha stood. Mr. Marsden, this is highly inappropriate. This presentation is not on the agenda. Madam President, I have not yet shared the agenda items. May I please proceed? The room turned and looked at her. She sat down. I clicked. Slide 9. A photograph of my grandfather, Otto Marsden, standing beside the cottonwood at the Bend in 1971. He was in a straw hat, in a work shirt, holding a survey chain. My grandmother had taken the photograph. He was 34 years old. He was smiling. This man carved the letter M into the south side of that cottonwood in 1971. The tree is still there. The carving is still there. My nephew Tate, Mr. Marsden's great-grandson, ran his thumb across it 10 days ago at 5:47 a.m. I looked at Tate. He nodded once at the room. I clicked. Slide 10. The pre-dawn photograph of Tate's hand on the carved M. Here is what I am proposing, neighbors. 5 points. I held up my left hand and ticked off 5 fingers. 1. None of the 48 families who bought into Verde Springs in good faith will be displaced. None of you. I want each homeowner to keep his home. A breath went through the room. The kind of breath you can hear. 2. The 12 homeowners whose lots are wholly or partly on my parcel will be offered, by me, a fair market land-only buyback at no profit to me, with 7-year amortization at 0 interest. The houses are yours. Only the underlying land needs to be made legally clean. A woman in the second row started to cry quietly. Her husband took her hand. 3. The HOA Master Declaration, as currently recorded, is void with respect to the common areas built on my land. I will, beginning Monday, lease those common areas back to a reconstituted Verde Springs HOA for the symbolic sum of $1 per year in perpetuity, conditional on the immediate removal of the current HOA board and the immediate restructuring of HOA dues at a rate fair to all 48 homeowners. 4. The $480,000 of dues collected on my land over 7 years will be returned to the homeowners who paid it, prorated to each household by the HOA within 90 days, funded by recovery from the responsible parties. I paused. 5. The responsible parties, Mr. and Mrs. Hargrove, will, as of this morning, face a referred federal investigation. I turned, slowly. I looked at the third row. Special Agent Kenley Burke, FBI San Antonio Field Office, is here this morning as a private citizen and a witness. Kenley Burke stood up. He said, "Folks, I can confirm that an investigation is underway. I cannot this morning comment further. I'm here to listen and to gather. If any of you have information you'd like to share, please come find me after." He sat down. Tabitha Hargrove was already standing. Tabitha Hargrove was already moving toward the side door. Roland Hargrove had already stood and was reaching for his jacket. Deputy Hector Quintana, from his post at the back wall, said, calmly, "Mr. and Mrs. Hargrove, I'd like both of you to please remain in the building. Agent Burke would like a word." They sat back down. The room exploded. Not into chaos, into something better. Into 240 people standing up at once, applauding, looking at each other, looking at Tate, looking at me, looking at the photograph of Otto Marsden standing beside his cottonwood in 1971, smiling at them from the screen. Tate, beside me at the projector, said quietly, "Granddad would have laughed his head off." I nodded. I think I would have cried, but my grandfather had also taught me, once, that a Marsden does not cry in public. I let myself smile instead. 6 months later, the cottonwood at the bend was the same tree, in the same place, with the same M still cut into its south side. My grandfather had been right about trees. They keep promises better than people. Roland Hargrove was indicted in July on federal mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy charges. Tabitha Hargrove was indicted alongside him on the same counts, plus making false statements to a county recorder. They both accepted plea deals in November. 5 years federal custody for Roland, 3 for Tabitha. Full restitution of just under $1 million to the Verde Springs homeowners. Full restitution of the parcel's recovered value to me, and permanent ban from real estate development and HOA service in the United States. Wesley Trapp, the surveyor who'd produced the fraudulent 2018 survey, had his Texas surveyor's license permanently revoked in September. Hal Plachette, the surveyor who'd done the honest work in March, received a small commendation from the state land office and an awkward thank you handshake from me at a Fredericksburg coffee shop. He wore the same straw hat my grandfather had worn. 11 of the 12 mansion owners accepted my land buyback offer within 30 days. They signed simple papers. They paid me fair market land value at 0 interest. They kept their houses. Their checks went into a Texas title escrow account that dispersed monthly to 7 different families who were victims of collateral fraud, including 3 elderly couples whose retirement savings had gone into Verde Springs deposits without proper title insurance. The 12th house belonged to an LLC. The LLC belonged to Roland Hargrove's brother. He had been flipping the property and had no intention of living there. I exercised my fixtures rights and took the house. It sits, today, on the corner of what was once my grandfather's south pasture. We have renamed it the Wyatt Marsden Veterans Lodge. It hosts, 4 weekends a year, retreats for combat veterans and their families, at no charge, through a program coordinated with the Texas Veterans Commission. The Verde Springs HOA was restructured under a new master declaration that I drafted and Earl Boyd cleaned up. The new declaration is 14 pages long, plain English, no Article 11, Section 3. The new HOA board is 5 neighbors elected by their fellow homeowners. No architectural review committee dictatorship. Dues went down 41%. The common areas on my land remain mine and are leased back to the HOA at $1 a year, in perpetuity, with a written prohibition against ever harassing a private inholding owner again. We founded 2 things. The first is the Otto Marsden Hill Country Scholarship, funded by what I recovered from the Hargroves. $5,000 a year to a Gillespie County High School graduate going into surveying, civil engineering, or trade school. The first recipient, this fall, is a kid named Riley Pruitt, whose late mother was a county engineer and whose father is a custodian at Stonewall Junior High. He is going into land surveying. He cried when he opened the letter. So, embarrassingly, did I. The second is a small, simple stone bench, set by hand on the south side of the cottonwood at the bend, facing the limestone marker my grandfather set in 1971. The bench has no inscription. It does not need one. Tate and I built it ourselves with limestone slabs from the creek. We mortared it on a Saturday in October. We ate sandwiches on it afterward and listened to the creek and the wind and the sound the cottonwood makes when its big silver leaves move in the late afternoon air. Tate started 9th grade at Stonewall Junior High the last week of August. He plays right field on the JV baseball team. He is hitting .312. He has, 3 afternoons a week, started walking down to Earl Boyd's office to listen to Earl tell stories about my grandfather and about the way hill country lawyers used to handle fence disputes before there were emails. Earl pays him in pie. Tate seems happy with the arrangement. Here is what I learned. Land remembers. Trees remember. Old deeds, properly drawn, written down by men who actually walked the line, are stronger than the fanciest survey a crooked developer can buy. Patience beats panic. Documentation beats deception. And when somebody tries to take what your grandfather worked his whole life to leave you, you do not need to shout. You just need to walk back into the woods, Find the cottonwood with the M on it, and remember who taught you to read it. If you have ever had your own HOA story, a fraudulent survey, a vanished boundary, a board that tried to lie a piece of your family land out from under you, drop it in the comments. I read every one. If you'd like more stories